Hello, my name is Sandra NIEMZ and I am a research assistant at the Department of Business Informatics at the Friedrich Schiller University in Jena, Germany. I'd like to present you our research on process organization in crisis situations with BPMN, CMMN and DMN. Here you see the agenda of the presentation. After a short introduction, I'd like to show you the framework of our research and after that the results and the conclusion that follows. Here you can see two examples of crises that occurred in the past few years or that is currently occurring. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the corona pandemic. Since the corona pandemic, at the latest, dealing with crisis situations has become an unavoidable topic for many companies, and they have to restructure their processes within a few days or within a short time due to government regulations. And that's where our research comes in. With the help of workflow management, processes can be planned in advance. However, a weakness of classic workflow management can be recognized when processes have to be adapted ad hoc in order to react quickly to changed conditions. One of the most widely used languages in workflow management is Business Process Model and Notation, BPMN. However, BPMN is only suitable to a limited extent for dynamic situations. These deficits can be compensated for with adaptive case management, in particular case management model and notation, CMMN, which focuses on case management, and decision model and notation, DMN, which focuses on decision-making processes. This paper aims to investigate a combination of these three modeling languages in context of crisis management. Characteristics of crisis are the uniqueness, the suddenness, the danger for the company, the variety of possible solutions, and the media and public attention that it evokes. It should also be mentioned in this context that related terms for crisis are emergency and disaster, which I've written down here and you can read by yourself. Crisis management on the right side of the presentation can be divided into 4 phases according to one of the most common and widely used accepted models. First, we have mitigation. These are activities that reduces the risk and mitigate negative effects or consequences. Preparedness are activities to develop procedures, processes, and instruments to identify crisis at an early stage. Response. When a crisis occurs, these are activities that focus on coping with the direct and short-term effects of the crisis. And the last phase, the recovery phase, are all activities that restore the normal state. We divided processes in this work for a better overview according to the degree of predictability, means whether a process is planned or unplanned, and the standard case, means if the process is a standard process or a non-standard process. This results in the following 4 process categories. And now I will give you an example what kind of process or what kind of activity is done in the different kind of process category. For example, if there is a company-wide failure of the internet, which has a significant impact on customer communication. To maintain the communication, the daily process P1 must be altered to switch, for example, to telephone or mobile internet, and a new process must be adapted. Means the standard process, which was planned beforehand, is now the unplanned crisis process. Such a process is then adapted by using a pre-existing emergency plan, P3, or by using an ad hoc plan, P4. The incident, no internet, needs to be handled in another non-standard process, P3 or P4, and after the changed daily business process during crisis, our crisis process needs to return to a normal daily basis, P1. And this rechange can be done as well with emergency or crisis plans. Because of the different process types, there are also problems that occur for workflow management, which are written down here. The problems are restricted situational overview because of the suddenness and the variety of different solutions, no support for managing resources, lack of flexibility, and no support for managing delegation. The resulting situation places special demands on workflow management systems, which were, like the problems also identified by Zell et al. As the following here. Overall, a crisis can affect any of these requirements and processes need to be adjusted. One of the most central and also the most difficult problem to deal with is the third requirement, adjustment of the workflow before and during execution. ACM can help there. In this way, ad hoc crisis plans and scenarios can be modeled and designed quickly. Even a prepared crisis plan as a template can be adapted to the crisis situation. The problem that must be dealt with is that suitable interfaces must be identified in a well-defined process, means in our normal daily process, in order to be able to react more flexible to the situation, which is also expressed by the fourth requirement. At the same time, the other requirements mentioned must also be taken into resources, and in context with this also rights management have to be redistributed or used differently in a crisis. Rights must be adaptable since, for example, external experts are involved in a crisis or in the event of disaster who help with coping and need access to data and information. In addition to these dynamic elements, it should still be possible to execute a workflow and also to have a general overview of the process, as classic workflow management can do well outside of crisis. One of the most widespread methods is BPMN from Object Management Group. This method is particularly suitable for process documentation. Weaknesses of BPMN can be found in the general weaknesses of workflow management systems. OMG has developed two other methods to help with this. But first, BPMN focuses on processes and the implementation of activities in them. The focus lies on passing the data from one activity to the next through tokens. CMMN focuses particularly on events that can occur during a business transaction. The focus is on data that are assigned to a specific context and generates information from it and thus manages it. CMMN can be altered runtime and is therefore a good alternative for knowledge-intense or ad hoc processes. DMN, its core concept is that decisions are made according to certain rules. The focus lies on application of the decision rules in connection with the context so that knowledge is generated from it. Now I like to discuss problems with BPMN during crisis. First, the overview. In order to be able to adapt the granularity of a process, BPMN offers sub-processes. There, further tasks can be stored and sub-processes can be additionally ad hoc. A disadvantage of using ad hoc sub-processes is that there are no swim lanes or pools to show task allocation. To skip tasks or change them in runtime is possible, but leads to a confusing and bloated model. The lack of clear task allocation due to no swim lanes and pools and the difficult handling of higher flexibility by skipping or dropping tasks is a problem in crisis, especially during the response phase. Second is resource management. In BPMN, rights are indirectly included in pools or swim lanes as roles. Resources can be displayed by data objects or stores. And when it comes to rights and resource management, BPMN has further problems during the crisis. If the processes are adjusted during the crisis with pure BPMN modeling, an expert is needed to adjust the process. Rights management is due to the role model also difficult to handle, for example, if an external person has to be involved, and with this, who has access to certain resources, for example, information and data. This would have an impact both in the recovery and the response phase, since the rights have to be adjusted there in the event of crisis. Likewise, authorization and access must be adapted to normal operations again and thus affect all standard and non-standard processes. A very similar question arises with regard to resources, which have to be used differently in crisis. And the last one is flexibility. Overall, it can be seen that flexibility is limited with BPMN. In crisis, processes needs to be able to adapt in an adequate time to changed conditions, and therefore daily business processes needs to have interfaces to combine them with CMMN and DMN, so a suitable process for crisis situation is created as P2. Or an already existing crisis plan modeled with BPMN, for example, can be altered with CMMN or DMN to fit to the situation. BPMN offers an important basis for daily business processes, P1. However, in crisis situations, they have to be more flexible. This is the similar case with crisis plans. BPMN can serve as a suitable template, but further adjustment needs to be done differently. Since this method forms the framework, a display of the process progress and the execution of the workflow with BPMN are also considered useful. In connection with crisis and processes, there is a large area of application for ACM and more precisely CMMN. Due to the high flexibility and the possible adjustment during runtime, unplanned processes can be organized as a support or on their own. Daily business processes can thus be adapted. With BPMN, it is possible to organize a sub-process ad hoc task with the help of CMMN, especially where the sequence of activities is not yet known or tasks are optional, but the desired output of the process is already known. CMMN offers stages to enhance clarity of the process. For unplanned crisis plans, which must show a high degree of flexibility, CMMN is a suitable tool to manage them. In prepared crisis plans, it is conceivable to combine these with BPMN. As previously explained, BPMN can serve as a rough framework and orientation. With CMMN, incident-specific modeling can be done. CMMN is therefore particularly relevant for the response and the recovery phase. Cases that have already been modeled can also be reused or adapted further. In relation to problems and requirements for workflow management, CMMN can improve flexibility in crisis by adapting the workflow during runtime and improve the overview of the situation through linear modeling. Like CMMN, DMN can be entered in a sub-process. Therefore, DMN can be used in any of the 4 types of processes. For planned crisis plans, DMN can be used to model certain decision thresholds and then to start appropriate workflow. During crisis, DMN can be used to supply all types of processes with information and data in a structured manner. In a situation like the corona pandemic, it is conceivable to enter the various government regulation in decision tables for which certain output scenarios are already known. For example, measures or easing that are depending on the incident value. Since the representation at the lowest level in DMN is possible with the help of decision tables, people who have little knowledge of modeling languages can also adjust them. This can increase flexibility enormously. Furthermore, the transparency of the process increases since it is clearly visible under which condition decisions are made and also who is responsible for them. So it is conceivable that the distribution of roles depending on the type or phase of the crisis is defined in advance in decision tables or is created during the crisis. Resource management can also be carried out with the help of decision tables, similar to rights management with DMN. DMN is not only suitable for a combination with BPMN, but can also be used together with CMMN. Similar to BPMN, a task in CMMN, which has an output that relies on decisions, this can be done with DMN, especially since CMMN does not have a precise organization of roles like BPMN does with swim lanes or pools. It is therefore considered sensible to supplement DMN at this point. Overall, DMN can be used in all previously listed types of processes and can therefore also be used in any crisis situation. In the phase of mitigation and preparedness, templates for DMN can be created, both for role models, resource use, and for decisions that are made depending on context information. In response and recovery phase, DMN can be used to allow processes to react dynamically to the crisis, and when the daily business process during crisis is returned to its normal state, it is conceivable to use parts of an already used DMN in reverse. In relation to requirements or problems of workflow management, a combination of BPMN and or CMMN with DMN can increase transparency or the overview due to better resource and rights management and support flexibility through faster decision-making. In summary, this work shows a possible way to combine the modeling languages BPMN, CMMN, and DMN in crisis management. In combination of all three approaches, process management during crisis can be made more flexible and adaptable and keep important properties of workflow management. Even if the object management group and others have already started to combine the three languages, BPMN, CMMN, and DMN has not yet been combined in a structured context of crisis management. As can be seen from the previous table, the languages are able to support the different requirements of workflow management in crisis and can also be used differently depending on the type of process and phase of crisis. Due to its widespread use, BPMN should be involved in crisis management, which, when combined with the other approaches, can show greater flexibility and transparency. This work offers the first theoretical overview of process organization with the three modeling languages. An evaluation in practice was already done during the Corona pandemic as part of university teaching, and in the future can also make a practical contribution, for example, to the acceptance of the application. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions or like to discuss this topic with us, please send an email.